The slap cracked through the Aurelia Grand's ballroom so sharply that the orchestra stopped mid-note. Champagne glasses shattered across the marble floor. 300 guests turned as Sloane Whitaker stood over her in a white designer gown, one hand still raised. "You were told not to come near my table," Sloane hissed. The maid touched her burning cheek and held Sloane's gaze. Across the room, billionaire Julian Cross went still. For one brief second, the maid looked at Sloane with the calm authority of someone who could have ended the entire evening with a single sentence. But she didn't. She bent down and began picking up the broken glass. Nobody in that ballroom, not Sloane, not Julian, not the hotel executives rushing toward them, knew that the woman kneeling on the floor owned every chandelier above them, every room beneath them, and the land the hotel stood on. 48 hours earlier, Mara Ellison had entered the Aurelia Grand through the staff entrance wearing a gray maid's uniform and a name badge that read Mara Lane. No sign that she was the daughter of the late Richard Ellison, founder of Ellison Hospitality, or that his private trust had transferred 72% ownership of the Aurelia Grand to her 6 weeks earlier. Her father had died believing someone inside the hotel was stealing from the people who kept it alive. Tips had disappeared, overtime records had been changed, and cleaning contracts had doubled while staff were denied new equipment. Mara could have entered with lawyers. Instead, she chose a uniform. "If they know who I am, they'll perform for me," she had told her legal advisor. "I need to see how they behave when they think I have no power." By the end of her first shift, she understood her father's fear. The laundry room had 2 broken machines. A cleaner named Tessa had worked 11 hours but had been ordered to record 8. Servers whispered that private event gratuities rarely reached them in full. Only Thomas Reed, the 67-year-old bell captain, spoke without fear. "You're new," he said as Mara polished brass. "Temporary agency." Thomas glanced at her hands. "You don't have cleaner's hands." "Maybe I learn quickly. In this building, learning quickly can be dangerous." Before Mara could question him, the revolving doors opened and Sloane Whitaker entered with 2 assistants and a photographer. Sloane was famous for charity galas. The staff knew another version of her. She dropped her coat into Mara's arms without looking at her. "My suite should be cold, the lilies should be white, and I don't want the same maid twice," she said. "Some of them get too comfortable." One assistant laughed. Sloane's engagement gala was the largest event the Aurelia Grand had hosted that year. She was marrying Julian Cross, a 36-year-old technology billionaire. Julian arrived without cameras. He thanked the doorman and helped a porter lift a dropped suitcase. Then he noticed Mara carrying Sloane's coat. "You shouldn't carry all of that alone," he said, taking 2 bags from her. Sloane turned. "Julian, she's staff." "I can see that." "Then let her do her job." The warmth left his face, but he handed the bags back. Mara noticed his hesitation. Decency without courage could still permit cruelty. That evening, Sloane summoned Mara to the presidential suite and made her replace every flower arrangement. Then she spilled red wine near the sofa and ordered Mara to clean it on her knees. While Mara worked, Sloane spoke on the phone as if no one else existed. "The Aurelia contract is approved," she said. "My foundation receives the event payment. Halcyon sends the consulting invoice, and everybody gets what they were promised." Mara's hand stopped. Halcyon Consulting. It was one of the companies her father had circled in red in his final notebook. Sloane continued. "Julian doesn't know. He thinks the gala is raising money for shelters. Just make sure the hotel staff never see the final numbers." Mara lowered her head and resumed cleaning. Sloane ended the call and looked down at her. "Did you hear any of that? I heard you ask for the stain to be removed." Sloane smiled. "Good answer." After midnight, Mara found Tessa crying beside a trolley. Her younger brother needed surgery, but the banquet manager had warned that a processing fee would take nearly half the gala gratuity. "They always do this," Tessa whispered. "If we complain, they stop giving us shifts." "What if someone could prove it?" Mara asked. Tessa wiped her eyes. "People like us don't prove things. We get replaced." After midnight, Mara entered the West Service lift and held a black keycard against the brass panel. A hidden light turned blue. The lift rose past the ballroom and opened into a private penthouse locked since her father's death. Mara stepped inside and removed her maid's badge. Her legal advisor, David Chen, waited beside the financial records. "You were right," Mara said. "The theft is connected to the Gala." "How high does it go?" She looked down at the hotel glowing beneath her. "High enough that they believe this building belongs to them." David opened a folder. Sloane Whitaker's foundation contract lay on top. "Tomorrow, I want every invoice linked to Halcyon. Every missing gratuity. Every altered shift record. And the board. Tell them nothing." David hesitated. "The Gala is tomorrow night. If Sloane discovers who you are—" "She won't," Mara said, picking up the maid's badge. "Not until I know who helped her steal from my staff." Below them, workers were preparing the ballroom. And somewhere inside the hotel, someone had just opened Richard Ellison's old security files and discovered that the new maid named Mara Lane did not exist. At 6 the next morning, Victor Hale sat alone in the hotel's security office, staring at Mara's employee file. Victor had managed the Aurelia Grand for 12 years. To the board, he was loyal, efficient, and impossible to replace. To the staff, he was the man who decided whose overtime disappeared and whose complaint became a termination letter. The file on his screen contained almost nothing. Mara Lane. Temporary housekeeping employee. No previous hotel experience. Emergency contact blank. Victor enlarged the security image from the private lift. Mara's face was partially hidden by the camera angle, but the black keycard in her hand was unmistakable. Only 3 people possessed that card. Victor, the hotel's legal counsel, and the owner. His phone rang before he could process the thought. "Did you find out who accessed the files?" Sloane asked. Victor leaned back. "A maid entered the private penthouse last night." Silence. Then Sloane laughed softly. "That's impossible. I watched it happen." "Who is she?" "I'm working on it." "Work faster. Tonight has to go perfectly." Victor looked at the Halcyon Consulting invoices spread across his desk. "You said the final payment would clear before the Gala." "It will. And my percentage?" "You'll receive it after Julian signs the hotel partnership announcement." Victor's jaw tightened. "You never mentioned a partnership." "Because you didn't need to know." The call ended. Victor stared at the dark phone screen. Sloane had always treated him like a useful servant, but he had tolerated it because the money was too good. Now an unknown maid had entered the owner's penthouse, and Sloane was changing their arrangement. For the first time, Victor began to wonder whether he was being prepared as the fall guy. Downstairs, Mara returned to work as if nothing had happened. She changed linen in the luxury suites, carried towels through crowded corridors, and listened. The staff spoke freely around people they considered powerless. 2 banquet supervisors complained that the Gala's charity fund had been transferred twice. A junior accountant whispered that Victor had ordered several invoices deleted. One server said Sloane's assistant had placed sealed envelopes inside the ballroom office. Every detail led back to Halcyon. At 10, Mara entered the staff dining room and found Thomas sitting alone with a cup of tea. "You're being watched," he said without looking up. Mara sat across from him. "By whom?" "Victor Hale." "Does he watch every new employee?" "Only the ones who use lifts they're not supposed to know exist." Mara's expression remained calm, but her fingers tightened beneath the table. Thomas finally looked at her. "I worked for your father for 26 years. Mara said nothing. "He used to walk through the kitchens after midnight," Thomas continued. "Not to inspect the staff, to learn their names." "You're mistaken." "No," his eyes softened. "You have his eyes." Mara glanced toward the dining room entrance. "Why haven't you exposed me?" she asked. "Because Richard Ellison was the only owner who ever stood beside us instead of above us." Thomas lowered his voice. 3 days before he died, he gave me a key and told me to use it if the hotel ever forgot what it was built for. He slid a small brass key across the table. "What does it open?" His old records room beneath the ballroom. Mara closed her hand around it. Did Victor know? Your father trusted Victor once. Then he discovered money missing from the staff pension fund. Mara's breath caught. Her father's notebook mentioned stolen tips and false contracts, but nothing about pensions. How much? More than 2 million. Mara looked toward the doorway again. Why wasn't it reported? Your father intended to confront the board. He died the following morning. The words settled between them. Richard Ellison's death had been ruled a heart attack. Sudden, tragic, natural. But Mara remembered the final voice message he had left her. I found something worse than theft. She had listened to it 100 times, assuming he meant the hotel accounts. Now she wasn't certain. Before she could ask another question, the dining room door opened. Victor stood there. His smile was polite, but his eyes moved immediately to Mara's closed hand. Mississippi Lane, he said. I need to see you in my office. Thomas started to rise. Victor held up a hand. This does not concern you. Mara slipped the brass key into her sleeve and followed him. Victor's office overlooked the ballroom, where decorators were covering tables in gold silk. Sloane stood below, directing workers while Julian spoke with hotel executives. Victor closed the door. You used the private lift last night. Mara met his stare. I used the service lift. The private lift is recorded. Then perhaps your records are wrong. Victor walked around his desk. You have no employment history before this agency. No emergency contact. No permanent address. I came here to clean rooms, not apply for a government position. His smile vanished. Who sent you? The agency. Who gave you the black keycard? Mara allowed a small pause. What black keycard? Victor stepped closer. You should leave this hotel before tonight. Am I being fired? I'm giving you advice. Advice usually doesn't sound like a threat. For a moment, neither moved. Then Victor opened the office door. Go back to work. Mara walked out without showing fear, but she now understood something important. Victor suspected her, but he did not yet know who she was. That gave her only a few hours. Near the ballroom entrance, Julian caught up with her. Mara. She stopped. He held a small first aid box. Sloane said one of the supervisors cut your hand yesterday. Mara looked at the faint line across her palm. It's nothing. Most people say that when something isn't nothing. He opened the box and offered her a bandage. Mara accepted it. You notice the staff more than your fiancé does, she said. Julian's expression changed. Sloane is under pressure. Pressure reveals people. It doesn't create them. The word struck harder than Mara intended. Julian looked toward the ballroom, where Sloane was scolding a florist in front of everyone. I keep telling myself she'll be different after the wedding. Mara placed the unopened bandage in her pocket. People usually become more of who they are after they believe you can't leave. Before Julian could respond, Sloane called his name from across the room. He walked away slowly, carrying Mara's words with him. That afternoon, David sent Mara the preliminary audit. Halcyon Consulting had received £4.8 million from the Aurelia Grand over 3 years. The company had no office, no employees, and no visible services. Its registered director was a retired accountant living in a care home. But one bank authorization connected Halcyon directly to Victor Hale. Another was linked to Sloane's foundation. Mara read the message twice. Then a new line appeared. There's more. Someone transferred money from your father's private account the night he died. Mara stopped breathing. How much? £750,000. Where did it go? David's reply took several seconds. Halcyon Consulting. Mara looked through the corridor windows at the ballroom below. Sloane was smiling for photographers. Victor was speaking quietly to a security guard. And Julian stood between them, unaware that the woman he planned to marry and the man managing the hotel might be connected to money stolen on the night Richard Ellison died. Mara touched the brass key hidden in her sleeve. The records room beneath the ballroom might contain the last evidence her father had collected. But as she moved toward the service stairs, Victor entered the security office and gave a new order. "Lock every exit," he told the guards. "The maid does not leave this hotel." The service stairwell beneath the ballroom smelled of dust, old paint, and cold stone. Mara moved quickly, keeping one hand against the wall as music from the rehearsal above vibrated faintly through the ceiling. The brass key Thomas had given her felt heavier with every step. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a narrow corridor hidden behind stacks of banquet chairs. At its end stood a steel door without a sign. The key turned. Inside, the room was almost completely dark. Mara switched on her phone light and saw shelves packed with hotel ledgers, employee files, old contracts, and boxes marked with her father's handwriting. Richard Ellison had never trusted digital records alone. He used to tell her, "A computer can be erased. Paper remembers." Mara began searching. The newest boxes contained payroll reports from the final year of her father's life. Overtime hours had been reduced before payment. Employee pension contributions had been withdrawn and redirected through temporary companies. Charity event gratuities had been recorded as administrative fees. Every path led to Halcyon Consulting. Then Mara found a small black recorder taped beneath a shelf. Her father's initials were scratched into the back. She pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this, I either failed to reach the board, or someone made certain I never did." Mara's body went still. "I believed Victor Hale was stealing from the hotel. I was wrong. Victor is only managing the theft. The person protecting him has access to the board, the charities, and the families who host events here." There was a rustling sound, followed by her father's tired breathing. "I traced the money to Halcyon. Sloan Whitaker's foundation is involved. But she is not working alone." Mara tightened her grip on the recorder. The final authorization came from someone using Julian Cross's investment office. Her heart sank. Julian. For a moment, every kind word he had spoken felt suddenly uncertain. Her father continued. "I do not know whether Julian is involved or whether someone has stolen his credentials. I planned to warn him tomorrow." The recording paused. Then Richard spoke more softly. "Mara, if this reaches you, do not trust appearances. A cruel person can smile. A decent person can remain silent. Both can cause damage." The recording ended. Mara stood in the darkness, trying to separate evidence from emotion. Julian had seemed genuine. But her father had trusted Victor once too. A sound came from the corridor. The steel door slammed shut. Mara rushed toward it and pulled the handle. Locked. Then smoke began sliding beneath the door. Not fire. Chemical smoke. Someone was trying to force her out, or make sure she never came out at all. Mara wrapped part of her apron across her mouth and searched the room. There were no windows, only a narrow ventilation panel near the ceiling. Her phone showed no signal. Above her, the Gala was less than 2 hours away. She climbed onto a filing cabinet and tore the vent cover loose. The opening was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Behind the panel, a maintenance shaft stretched upward into darkness. Mara pushed the recorder into her pocket and began climbing. In the security office, Victor watched the camera outside the records room. Smoke filled the corridor, but the door remained closed. One of the guards looked uneasy. What if she passes out? Victor did not look away from the screen. Then we discover why a temporary maid was breaking into restricted rooms. You said we were only frightening her. Victor turned slowly. Do you enjoy working here? The guard lowered his eyes. Yes, sir. Then stop asking questions. Victor's phone rang. Sloan. Is it handled? She asked. She's trapped. Good. Julian has started asking about the charity accounts. Victor frowned. Why? Because the maid has been speaking to him. Then keep him away from her. Sloan laughed bitterly. That seems to be the one thing I can't make him do. In the shaft, Mara's arms began to shake. The metal ladder had rusted away halfway up, forcing her to brace her feet against the walls and pull herself higher using pipes. Smoke rose beneath her. A loose pipe shifted under her hand. She slipped. Her shoulder struck the wall and pain shot down her arm, but she caught a cable before falling. For several seconds, she hung above the dark shaft. Then she heard a voice through the vent above. "Miss Ellison?" It was Thomas. Thomas! He pulled the upper grate loose and reached down. Together, they dragged Mara into a linen storage room. Her eyes watered. Her uniform was covered in dust, and blood ran from a cut near her shoulder. Thomas stared at the smoke rising through the shaft. "They tried to kill you. They tried to stop me." Mara removed the recorder from her pocket. "I found my father's voice." Thomas looked at it as if he were seeing a ghost. "What did he say?" "That Victor and Sloane were stealing. But someone used Julian Cross's office to authorize the transfers." Thomas's face tightened. "Do you think Julian knew?" "I don't know." "Then you need to find out before you trust him." Mara nodded. A message appeared on her phone as the signal returned. David had completed the access trace. The authorizations had come from Julian's private account, but every login had been made while Julian was traveling abroad. The device belonged to someone else. Sloane Whitaker. Mara looked at Thomas. Julian wasn't stealing. Then Sloane used him. And tonight she plans to make him announce a partnership with the hotel. Once he signs, his company becomes connected to every false contract. Thomas understood immediately. She's not marrying him for his money. "No," Mara said. "She's marrying him so he can take the blame." Upstairs, the first guests began arriving. The ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Cameras flashed at the entrance. Reporters gathered near the stage where Julian was expected to announce a new £40 million partnership between Cross Technologies and the Aurelia Grand. Sloane appeared in a white gown, smiling as though nothing in the world could touch her. Victor approached her near the private corridor. The maid escaped. Sloane's smile remained fixed for the photographers. "What?" "She used the ventilation shaft." "Where is she now?" "I don't know." Sloane looked across the ballroom and saw Julian speaking to David Chen, Mara's legal advisor. Fear entered her eyes. "Stop the announcement," Victor whispered. "I can't." If Julian signs publicly, his company becomes responsible for the hotel audit. "And if the maid reaches him first?" Sloane's expression hardened. "Then I'll make sure nobody believes a word she says." In the staff changing room, Mara cleaned the blood from her shoulder and put on a fresh maid's uniform. Thomas watched her in disbelief. "You can't go back into that ballroom dressed like this. That uniform is the reason they spoke freely around me. They know you're dangerous now." "No. They think I'm powerless." Mara pinned the name badge back onto her chest. Mara Lane. David entered carrying a sealed folder. "I have the complete financial chain," he said. "But there's a problem. Victor has already told hotel security you stole confidential records." "Can we call the police?" "We can, but Sloane will claim the documents were fabricated. The original authorization device is the strongest evidence." "Where is it?" David looked toward the ballroom. "Sloane's private handbag." Thomas shook his head. "She has 2 guards beside her." Mara studied the gala floor plan. The champagne toast would begin in 12 minutes. During the toast, Sloane would stand on stage beside Julian. Her handbag would remain at the head table. Mara took a serving tray. "I only need 30 seconds." When she entered the ballroom, conversation continued around her. Hundreds of guests saw nothing more than another maid carrying champagne. But Victor saw her immediately. His face drained of color. He whispered to a security guard and pointed. Mara moved between tables, closing the distance to Sloane's chair. 10 feet. 6 feet. 3. Her fingers touched the handbag. A hand closed around her wrist. Julian stood beside her. For a second, neither spoke. His eyes moved from the cut on her shoulder to the dust still caught in her hair. "What happened to you?" Mara looked toward Sloane, who was watching from the stage. "I need you to trust me for the next 60 seconds. Julian's grip loosened. Before he could answer, Victor's voice thundered across the ballroom. "Stop that woman!" The music died. Security guards surrounded Mara. Every guest turned. Sloane stepped down from the stage, her expression carefully arranged into shock. "That maid broke into private records," she announced. "She has been stealing from the hotel." Whispers spread through the room. Victor reached for Mara's pocket, where Richard's recorder was hidden. Mara stepped back. Sloane smiled, certain she had regained control. Then Julian moved between Mara and the guards. "No one touches her," he said. The ballroom went silent. Sloane stared at him. "Julian, she's a thief." Julian looked at Mara. "Then let her speak." Mara slowly placed the serving tray on a table. She could expose her ownership now. She could end the gala with one sentence. But before she could speak, Sloane grabbed the recorder from her pocket and threw it into a champagne bucket. The device disappeared beneath the ice and water. "My father's last evidence," Mara whispered. Sloane leaned close enough that only Mara could hear her. "Now prove anything." Then she lifted her hand and struck Mara across the face. The slap echoed beneath the chandeliers. 300 guests froze. Sloane expected Mara to lower her head. Instead, Mara slowly turned back toward her, touched her burning cheek, and said in a voice calm enough to frighten everyone nearest to her, "You just assaulted the owner of this hotel." For 3 seconds, nobody in the ballroom moved. Then laughter broke from one of the tables. Sloane turned toward the guests with a cold smile. "You see, she's desperate. First she steals records, now she claims she owns the hotel." Mara didn't look at her. She looked at Victor. The color had disappeared from his face. David Chen stepped into the center of the ballroom and opened the sealed folder in his hands. "My name is David Chen, legal counsel for Ellison Hospitality," he announced. 6 weeks ago, following the death of Richard Ellison, 72% ownership of the Aurelia Grand transferred to his only daughter. He removed a certified document and held it up. "Mara Ellison." Whispers swept across the room. Several board members stood so quickly that their chairs scraped against the marble. Victor began moving toward a side exit. "Lock the doors," Mara ordered. This time, the security guards obeyed her. Sloane stared at the maid's uniform, then at the chandeliers above them, as if the entire building had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. "You planned this," she whispered. "I came here to discover why my staff were losing wages, pensions, and tips," Mara replied. "You provided the answer." Julian stepped toward Sloane. "You used my company's authorization codes." Her eyes flashed toward him. "That's absurd." David placed copies of the transfer records on a nearby table. Every false authorization was made from a device registered to Miss Whitaker. Julian picked up the papers. His expression hardened as he read the dates. "You logged into my account while I was overseas." Sloane's confidence cracked. "I was protecting our future." "You were preparing to blame me." Sloane grabbed his arm. "Julian, listen to me. Victor designed the accounts. He told me everything was legal." Victor stopped near the ballroom doors. "You approved every transfer," he snapped. "You chose the charities because no one audits suffering children too closely." Gasps rose from the guests. Sloane stared at him. "You fool." Victor laughed bitterly. "You were going to sacrifice me the moment the audit began." Their partnership was collapsing in front of everyone. Mara stepped toward the champagne bucket and pulled out her father's soaked recorder. Water dripped from its broken casing. Sloane smiled faintly. "Your evidence is destroyed." "Not all of it," Mara said. Thomas Reed appeared beside the orchestra carrying a small laptop. "Mr. Ellison never trusted a single copy," he said. He connected the laptop to the ballroom sound system. Richard Ellison's voice filled the room. If you are hearing this, someone tried to stop me. Sloane went pale. The recording described Halcyon Consulting, the stolen pension money, and Victor's involvement. Then Richard mentioned the authorizations connected to Julian's office. Guests turned toward him. Julian stood still, accepting their suspicion. But the recording continued. I believe Julian Cross's credentials were stolen. The device fingerprint belongs to Sloane Whitaker. The ballroom erupted. Sloane rushed toward the laptop, but Mara stepped between them. You hid behind charity, Mara said. You stole from workers who could barely pay rent, and you planned to destroy the man you were marrying. Sloane's face twisted. You think wearing that uniform makes you noble? You were born owning this place. You have no idea what it means to fight for power. Mara looked at Tessa, Thomas, the servers and cleaners standing along the walls. No. They fought for this hotel. People like you simply took from it. Applause began quietly among the staff. Then it spread through the ballroom. Sloane's humiliation turned into panic. She pointed at Mara. Ask her how her father really died. The applause stopped. Mara's expression changed. Victor lowered his head. Sloane saw the reaction and smiled. Richard Ellison discovered the theft, she continued. But that isn't why he died. Stop talking, Victor warned. Sloane ignored him. The night he died, someone entered his penthouse. Someone changed his heart medication and transferred £750,000 from his private account. Mara looked at Victor. You were there. Victor said nothing. Security moved toward him, but he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small remote. If anyone comes closer, he said, every financial archive in this building disappears. David's face tightened. The servers. Victor raised the remote higher. I created the system. I can erase everything. Mara took one slow step forward. You won't. Why? Because without those records, Sloane can blame everything on you. Victor glanced toward Sloane. That moment of doubt was enough. Thomas struck Victor's wrist with his cane. The remote fell. A security guard caught it before it hit the floor. Victor was forced to his knees. Sloane tried to run, but Julian blocked her path. It's over, he said. Police sirens sounded outside the hotel. For the first time all night, Mara allowed herself to breathe. Then Victor began laughing. You still don't understand, he said. Mara turned. Your father recorded the theft, but he never recorded his final visitor. Victor looked directly at Julian. Ask him where he was the night Richard Ellison died. Every face turned toward Julian. Mara waited for him to deny it. He didn't. His voice was barely audible. I was in this hotel. I was in this hotel, Julian repeated. The police entered the ballroom as the guests stared at him. Mara's voice was quiet. Why? Julian looked toward Richard Ellison's portrait above the fireplace. Your father called me that evening. He said someone had been using my company credentials to move money through Halcyon. He asked me to come alone because he didn't know whom he could trust. Sloane laughed from beside the officers. How convenient. Julian ignored her. When I reached the penthouse, Richard was already struggling to breathe. His medication bottle was open on the table. Victor was standing near the private lift. Every eye turned toward Victor. He told me Richard had suffered a heart attack, Julian continued. I called for an ambulance. Richard grabbed my wrist before losing consciousness and said one word, device. I didn't understand what he meant. Why didn't you tell the police you were here? Mara asked. Because Victor showed them security footage proving I had entered the penthouse minutes before your father collapsed. He said if I accused him, he would release the footage and claim I killed Richard to hide the stolen transfers. Mara stared at him. So you stayed silent. Julian lowered his head. I was a coward. I convinced myself the doctors were right and your father's death was natural. I should have told the truth, even if it destroyed me. Mara remembered her father's warning. A decent person can remain silent. Both can cause damage. You let my family believe he died alone, she said. Yes. There was no defense in Julian's voice. Only shame. Victor struggled against the guards. He's lying. Thomas stepped forward. Then perhaps the penthouse camera will tell us. Victor's face changed. David opened Richard's files on the laptop. Hidden among the financial documents was a security backup labeled with the date of his death. Mara pressed play. The ballroom screen showed Richard entering the penthouse, followed several minutes later by Victor. Victor removed a small bottle from his pocket and exchanged it with the medication on the table. Sloane appeared next. She handed Victor a device and watched him transfer money from Richard's private account. Then Julian arrived. The video showed him rushing to Richard's side and calling emergency services while Victor quietly removed the original medication bottle. The recording ended. Silence filled the room. Victor's knees weakened. It wasn't supposed to kill him, he said. Only make him confused long enough for us to finish the transfer. You replaced heart medication, Mara replied. What did you think would happen? Sloane pulled away from the officer holding her. This was Victor's plan. Victor turned on her. You chose the dose. You said an old man's death would look natural. The words destroyed the last of their lies. Police placed both of them in handcuffs. As Victor was taken away, Thomas stood in front of him. For 12 years, these workers feared you, he said. Tonight, remember how quickly power disappears when the people beneath you finally stop protecting your secrets. Sloane looked toward Julian as the officers led her past him. You can't let them do this. I was going to be your wife. Julian removed the engagement ring from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. You were going to make me your alibi. She searched his face for weakness and found none. The ballroom doors closed behind her. Mara looked around at the staff standing along the walls. Some were crying. Others were holding hands. This hotel stole from you, she announced. Not the building. The people trusted to manage it. She ordered David to restore every missing wage, pension contribution, and gratuity with interest. Victor's executive salary and property would be placed under court seizure. Sloane's foundation accounts would fund compensation for the employees and the charities she had used as cover. Tessa covered her mouth when Mara told her that her brother's surgery would be paid from the recovered money. Not as charity, Mara said. It belongs to the people they stole from. Then she turned to Thomas. My father trusted you with his last evidence. Thomas's eyes filled. He trusted you to come back. Mara looked at her maid's uniform. I almost didn't. The guests expected her to remove it immediately. Instead, Mara walked to the center of the ballroom and faced the cleaners, servers, cooks, porters, and laundry workers. For 2 days, this uniform allowed me to hear the truth. I will never wear it again, but I will never be ashamed that I did. The staff began applauding. This time, the wealthy guests followed them. Julian remained silent near the stage. When the ballroom finally emptied, he found Mara standing alone beneath her father's portrait. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. Good. He accepted the answer. But I will testify, he continued. I'll give the investigators everything. The footage, the threats, my accounts. Whatever it costs. It may cost your company. I know. Your reputation. I know. Mara studied him. For the first time, he was not asking someone else to make courage easier for him. Then tell the truth, she said. Not for me. Because you should have told it 11 years ago. Over the following months, Victor and Sloane were convicted of fraud, theft, conspiracy, and their role in Richard Ellison's death. Julian testified publicly and accepted responsibility for his silence. Several investors left him, but the employees who remained said they trusted the man who finally told the truth more than the billionaire who had once protected his image. Mara rebuilt the Aurelia Grand from the inside. Executive offices were reduced. Staff wages increased. Every employee received direct access to payroll records, legal support, and a share of yearly profits. Thomas became the hotel's first employee representative on the board. Tessa finished her training and became the new housekeeping supervisor. 1 year later, the Aurelia Grand hosted another gala. Not for socialites. For the hotel workers and their families. Mara entered the ballroom wearing a simple blue dress. No one moved aside because she was the owner. They welcomed her because she had kept her promise. Julian was there too, invited by Thomas after months of helping recover the stolen funds. He and Mara had not rushed toward romance. Trust returned slowly, through honest conversations and difficult questions. When he offered her a glass of champagne, he did not ask her to forget the past. He said, "Your father saved this hotel by leaving behind the truth." Mara looked around at the workers laughing beneath the same chandeliers that had once witnessed her humiliation. "No," she replied. "They saved it by finally being heard." The scar on her cheek from Sloane's ring had faded, but Mara never covered it. It reminded her that power was not owning a hotel. Power was entering a room where everyone believed you were invisible, and leaving it after making sure nobody else would ever be treated that way again. Sometimes a slap is meant to remind someone of their place. But that night, it revealed who truly owned the room.